Story 1. In South Korea and possibly other locations, there are small buttons placed on restaurant tables. When you want to get the waiter's attention, you press the button. This signals them to come to your table. They attend to your needs directly, which eliminates the need for someone to periodically check in to see if you need anything. The button system allows for a smooth dining experience without interruptions. Story 2. In Peru, everyone remains seated when the plane lands. Then, the flight attendants walk back a few rows at a time and signal that section to stand, grab their bags, and exit the plane. This process is simple and peaceful. However, this has not been everyone's experience in Peru. My trip was in 2021, and it was this way on every flight, both international and domestic, except for the return flight. I also want to mention that this was an amazing trip with a rich culture, and I highly recommend it. Story 3. The Spanish siesta culture changed my life while I lived abroad. Taking a proper break in the middle of the day made me more productive. Now, I take a 20-minute nap during my lunch break at work, and my afternoons are much better. Story 4. I am Mexican, and I believe that if we all celebrated the Day of the Dead, people would have a much healthier approach to death and, therefore, to life. Story 5. I wish Americans were more community-minded and less individualistic in terms of gathering for meals and hospitality. We participate in those activities, but it feels more like a special occasion than the norm for many people. Story 6. I wish the easily walkable cities and walking paths between gardens in the United Kingdom were popular in the United States. It frustrates me every time I return to the United States and cannot walk to places easily. Story 7. If there is a chance you are sick or exposed, you should wear a mask without acting like it is a major inconvenience. Story 8. The practice of adults moving out and living their lives according to their desires is common in many countries. In Azerbaijan and many Muslim-majority nations, there is resistance to seeing daughters as independent individuals. They can only move out after getting married. If they do not marry, they remain living with their parents, who interfere in every aspect of their lives. Story 9. Widespread installation of bidets. I can count on one hand the number of public restrooms I have used in America that have bidets. Story 10. Japanese bath technology is deep, can automatically fill and keep warm. There are also more bidets and improved cleanliness. Weddings should be more colorful and joyful, similar to those in India, rather than the typically dull and white weddings I have experienced in North America. I attempted to encourage my guests to wear color to my wedding, but they all chose blue on the day. It is customary to remove shoes in homes, as seen in Japan and Canada. I appreciated the casual friendliness I encountered in Australia. I enjoyed adhering to the actual speed limit in Australia and not having to tip, as is customary in both Australia and Japan. Story 11. Many Maori traditions emphasize respect and community. Shoes are removed inside homes, classrooms, and various other spaces. The Hongi salute is a traditional greeting. The pauhairi, a welcoming ceremony, involves singing to welcome someone into the community, and they are expected to sing back. I felt incredibly welcomed on my first day in New Zealand long ago. Funerals can last up to 2 weeks, providing time to process grief. The haka is performed before major sports events as a demonstration of strength and unity. Maori people are remarkable, and their traditions are invaluable. Story 12. Germany here. What I loved in France was the culture of taking an hour for lunch to go to a restaurant and enjoy a good meal and social time together. Additionally, restaurants always provide bread and water for free, along with free refills. Story 13. The German rule of quiet time. I would love just one Sunday that isn't full of leaf blowers, children on trampolines, drilling, or revving engines. Story 14. I would like to bring my healthcare from Denmark to the United States. I can have it packed up and ready to go in a few weeks. Story 15. When I was in South Korea in the 1980s, sick people wore masks. I remember thinking how considerate they were. Story 16. Respect for public spaces so we can all enjoy them. Let's keep them clean and not vandalize them. Let's appreciate and enjoy our surroundings. Story 17. The culture of not being late. I am from the Philippines, and we have a concept called Filipino time. where most people tend to be late when attending events, and many seem to shrug it off. To me, it is incredibly toxic that we are encouraging laziness, and those who are often late are the same individuals demanding more leniency and making excuses. On the other hand, East Asian countries, such as China, Japan, and South Korea, promote a culture where one feels pressured to work extremely hard in school or at work. Otherwise, they risk being viewed as a failure. Story 18. Politely cover your face if you're sick with anything contagious to prevent spreading it to others. Story 19. Taking off shoes before entering a home is important. I adore my husband, but I grew up always removing my shoes at the door, and he did not. I had to train him and explain why it's necessary to keep the home clean. Story 20. Fun seasonal flavors for everything. I swear, everything in Japan has a special seasonal flavor for each season. It's fantastic. Story 21. The clothing. Is there any woman of any age, of any body type, who doesn't look amazing in a sari? It is incredibly beautiful. Even the plainest one resembles a fairy tale dream. I could say the same about countless other traditional outfits from around the world, for both men and women. Much of European and North American fashion seems to focus on being a mere vessel for clothing. Outfits look great only if you are thin, young, and conventionally attractive. But put a thobe or burqa robe on any man, and suddenly he appears regal. Story 22. Learning Spanish in kindergarten is a waste of time without continuation. Students often wait until 7th grade to continue, where they have the choice of studying French or Spanish. We learn how to ask where the library is located. The only bilingual individuals in our country are those who were raised in bilingual households or participated in exchange programs, and that depends on whether their parents want them to learn another language. My mother was sent home on her first day of kindergarten because her teacher could not understand her German accent, and she has never become fluent in German. Story 23. I lived in Germany and really enjoyed the lack of small talk. I know many other countries, mostly in Europe, do this. Germans are not cold people. They just don't engage in routine greetings like, "Hi, how are you? Good. And you?" "I'm good." "Good. The weather sure is nice today." "I know. It's such a beautiful day." When it comes to strangers, you are not impolite. A simple Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, or Guten Abend will suffice. Story 24. As someone who just gave birth 5 days ago, I am experiencing postpartum confinement similar to customs in China, Korea, and various African cultures. Additionally, I wish the United States offered paid maternity and paternity leave like other developed countries. The fact that women receive minimal maternity leave here is disheartening. I had a cesarean section, and if I hadn't saved for my time off, I would be going back to work in about 2 weeks. I don't even feel 20% healed at this point. My husband is staying with me for 2 weeks, and that's only possible because he is using accrued vacation time. The United States struggles with providing adequate care for its citizens. We could vastly improve the system if more people weren't so misled into believing that everything related to social support is negative. Story 25. I'm not sure how many countries have bottle recycling programs that offer money back, but I feel like this should be a worldwide initiative. Story 26. The European idea of moving out of the passing lane to let other cars by was refreshing. I want that. Story 27. Social distancing is important. There is no reason to sit so close to me if every seat on the train is available. Story 28. Multigenerational homes are becoming more common in the United States due to the poor economy, but it is still largely viewed as unusual to live with parents or grandparents. Story 29. European drivers pay a lot of attention to pedestrian crossings. They stop immediately when they see a pedestrian. This might be more of a legal requirement than a cultural norm, but I wish the whole world was like this. Story 30. Asian postpartum confinement involves a 30-day period during which a mother's primary focus is on proper and comfortable recovery. Story 31. I am in the United States. I wish people would take their shoes off in the house. I believe we do not realize how much dirt we track into the home. Story 32. Please take off your shoes inside the house. It drives me insane. I don't want you bringing dirt inside. Story 33. As a Brit, there are both political and non-political aspects I observe. The political aspect is the French protest culture. I wish we were more willing to complain and create disruption over issues we disagree with. The non-political aspect is Dutch directness. I would prefer we cut to the chase. Small talk is uninteresting, and I often find it confusing to navigate ambiguous communication. People can become offended when assumptions about their contextual clues are misinterpreted, especially when they do not directly share the information they wish to convey. Story 34. I was going to mention siesta from Spain, but then I noticed the top result was cleanliness from Japan, which is also a great answer. Likewise, I understand that wearing masks to prevent the spread of disease was normal in Eastern Asia long before the COVID-19 pandemic. Essentially, I would like to see compassion for ourselves and for each other become the norm. It is important to take time and care to prioritize humanity. Story 35. The beautifully crafted insults from Nigerian parents are truly unique. Every time I see a Nigerian child being reprimanded, it feels like listening to a poetry performance. Story 36. The Japanese habit of taking off shoes when entering homes. It never really made sense to me. You put your shoes on the streets, which are often dirty and full of trash, and then you bring them into your home, making it difficult to keep clean. If you find it disgusting to touch the ground or sit on the streets, you should also find it disgusting to touch a street shoe on your floors and carpets. Story 37. The Irish custom of holding a wake for 3 days with the body of the deceased in the living room in a casket allows friends, neighbors, and family members to come together and share stories and memories. It fosters a strong sense of community as everyone remembers the person who has passed away, providing time to process the death. Story 38. As an American living in the Caribbean, I wish taking off shoes in houses was normalized in both regions. Shoes are unclean. Story 39. One thing I would like to see is the Western society adopt the idea of not putting older people out to pasture. Asian societies, especially, seem to take great care of their elders. Western countries seem to neglect this responsibility for most of the year. Story 40. I wish people in my country would wear a mask when they are sick but have to go outside. I dislike how often people sneeze and cough in public, especially on public transport, and do not have the common decency to cover their mouths with their elbow. Story 41. Wearing a mask when sick is important. People often sneeze and cough in the United States, and the lack of common decency can be frustrating. Stores allow customers to bring drinks while shopping, but leaving unfinished drinks on shelves haphazardly is inconsiderate. Story 42. Spain starts things late. I have always been a night owl and absolutely loved how late everything is open in Spain. Dinner at 10 p.m. Places open until 1 a.m. all throughout the week. Things open and close so early in America. Story 43. Wearing a face mask when you are sick, such as when coughing or sneezing, in public enclosed places like transportation or shops is important. I hoped that we would adopt this practice, similar to how people in East Asia did during previous pandemics after COVID-19. However, we all know how it turned out. Story 44. Those Japanese and Korean toddlers who walk to the store, pick up grocery orders, and do chores, like on the show Old Enough, demonstrate independence. American children often appear soft and helpless due to overly gentle parenting. While I wouldn't send my child to the store alone, I appreciate the idea of fostering that level of independence and confidence early on. Story 45. I believe this gesture is practiced in China and possibly Japan, where handing and receiving items with both hands signifies respect. I appreciate this mindful attention to detail. Additionally, in Japan, it is customary to wave goodbye until the person is no longer visible. I am unsure if this is a common practice in Russian culture, but in America, everyone I have met from Russia and Ukraine sincerely asks and answers the question, "How are you?" Story 46. I work in social services, and most of the cultures I engage with have a significant hospitality component. When someone comes to your home, you offer food, and everyone sits together to visit. I love this. Story 47. Japan is a very spiritual country. and its people still pray at shrines and temples. I wish my country had that spiritual connection, as most people consider any belief other than that of God to be normal. Story 48. Eating from plates made of leaves, known as patal, is not an everyday occurrence. These plates are typically used during communal or free meals at religious events. I believe that, compared to plastic, these plates are significantly better for the environment. Story 49. Men sitting down to urinate, similar to practices in Germany, is more normalized there than in other places, although not all men follow this habit. Story 50. Masks are commonly worn in many parts of Asia when individuals are ill. It is not a political issue. It is simply a cultural practice. Another custom is removing shoes before entering a home, as walking indoors with outside shoes can be considered unclean. Lastly, showering before going to bed is another common practice. Story 51. Which cultures are not swept up in mindless xenophobia and worship of billionaires while we all slip closer to homelessness? Story 52. Take your shoes off in the house. Many countries practice this, and having lived in one, I can't go back now. The outdoors is so dirty that it's unappealing to wear shoes in your home. Seeing people on their couches or beds with their shoes on is just unpleasant. Story 53. This is so silly, and I completely understand why it's not a thing in America. I grew up in Russia, and in most European cultures, people hug or kiss on the cheek when meeting someone or saying goodbye. I was very accustomed to this, and some of my family still practices it. Many Russians I meet who aren't too Americanized still follow this custom, but it's not as common now, especially after 2020. America seems to lack a definitive greeting. In some Asian cultures, people bow, and the handshake is optional. But in America, it always feels awkward. I'm fine if someone goes for a hug or a kiss on the cheek, and I understand why some people don't like that. However, there are instances when people are introduced and just kind of stare at you or smile awkwardly. If someone nodded right away and stood still, I would think, okay, cool, we're nodding. Or if they reached out their hand first. But why do I encounter people awkwardly waving from 2 feet away for no reason? Clearly isn't due to germophobia. It's just awkward. I really dislike it, but I know it won't change. Story 54. Valuing socially beneficial things like access to education, healthcare, and public transit without shouting socialism. Everything that might help communities in the United States is condemned if it doesn't require self-reliance. Americans often do not want other Americans to succeed in life. Story 55. I believe many people could benefit from being more direct, similar to the communication style in Germany. While Germany is often perceived as extreme in its directness, I find it frustrating when my international friends avoid simply saying no and setting boundaries. They often feel that being direct is considered impolite or mean. For example, my international friends frequently express their dissatisfaction with having to take on additional tasks at work that are not included in their contracts. I encourage them to assert themselves by stating that those tasks are not part of their job, that they are not trained for those responsibilities, and that they are already occupied with their actual duties. It often feels as though they are gasping for air over the Atlantic. Being direct does not equate to being rude or mean. Story 56. As a half-Japanese person living in Texas, I believe that America needs a major lesson in cleanliness. The amount of trash I see scattered on the ground every day is disheartening. Story 57. From the United States. Taking your shoes off inside is important. If you think about it, it's quite unpleasant. There is less cleaning to do when you aren't tracking in any dirt. It would be nice if every toilet had a hose or built-in bidet. Using dry toilet paper to clean yourself is unappealing. Story 58. I wish we took better care of new mothers. When I had my son, he was in the neonatal intensive care unit for about a month. My mother had to fly back home before he was discharged because she had to return to work. I was living in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area at the time and hadn't been there even a year when I had my son. Everyone kept to themselves for the most part, so it was essentially a neighborhood of strangers. An older Korean couple lived 2 doors down from me. The wife must have noticed that I wasn't pregnant anymore and that my mother had left. She started bringing over soup every day. I didn't speak Korean, and she didn't speak much English. But those daily little check-ins made me feel less alone. The soups she brought were quite good. Once my son was a little older, I brought them cookies on holidays and made some jambalaya for them once. They ended up moving away when my son was a toddler. I hope that move took them to a place where they were happy. Story 59. The courtesy of wearing a mask when you may be sick is important. Courtesy in general is essential. The notion that it is acceptable to be rude to others simply for the sake of being tough needs to stop. Story 60. I really love saris. The saris in India are amazing and beautiful. I don't understand why we don't all wear them in the summer. It gets so hot, and saris are a great choice for warm weather. Additionally, the squat toilets that have been installed in the national parks, such as Arches and Canyonlands, are excellent. They should be in all public restrooms. This way, we wouldn't have to worry about someone hovering and making a mess on the seat. We are all crouching, and it's a perfect and clean solution. Story 61. It is common for various cultures to understand transgender individuals as a third gender, not quite a man but not quite a woman either. I believe that is a reasonable perspective. Story 62. Wearing a mask to protect others when you feel sick is a sign of respect practiced in many Asian countries. Story 63. I wish we could celebrate death more like Mexico. Death in the United Kingdom is somber and sad. It focuses on the passing rather than the celebration of life. People are often forgotten rather than remembered for generations. The Day of the Dead seems amazing to me, like life being breathed back into those we've lost in a sea of color and music. Story 64. I think it's the Philippians that do this. But when they line up, they leave their sandals in line and sit down. As an aging gentleman, I really need that kind of energy in my life. Story 65. The kotatsu. Everywhere with cold weather should adopt this Japanese tradition. For those unfamiliar, it's a low table with a heater underneath the tabletop and a thick quilt that hangs down to the floor. You sit on the floor with your legs under the quilt, keeping you warm. Kotatsu are rare outside of Japan, which is difficult to understand. If I had a table that was also a heater and a blanket, I would spend all day there from November through April each year. Story 66. I am not Icelandic but Canadian. I enjoy the books at Christmas that are available in Iceland. Since learning about this, I tend to buy a book for everyone on my Christmas list. I lean towards more educational books that reflect their interests and hobbies. Story 67. Do not wear your shoes indoors. Place them neatly near the front door on a shoe rack. Wear indoor slippers for comfort and cleanliness. Story 68. Calling everyone you know in your parents' generation aunt and uncle feels like the right balance of familiarity and respect. Story 69. Iceland's holiday tradition called jólapkafól involves gifting family and friends the latest bestsellers along with a bar of chocolate during the winter holidays. Everyone finds a cozy spot to read their new books and enjoy the chocolate. I sometimes include a bottle of something sparkling. Story 70. People are just minding their business like Germans. Honestly, I love that they won't try to annoy you and allow you to mind your own business. Story 71. I wish the United States would ban plastic bags at grocery stores. There are enough reusable bags now that single-use bags are no longer needed. Story 72. I wish more people would adopt the Japanese practice of ikigai, which emphasizes finding purpose and balance in life. Story 73. Bowing instead of handshakes. I have noticed since the end of COVID that I'm not often offered a handshake anymore, and I never offer one. Instead, the natural movement seems to be eye contact, a smile, and a slight incline of the head and upper body. It resembles a small Asian greeting adapted with the North American edition of eye contact and smiling, with no rules about how deep the bow should be. I find it a refreshing acknowledgement of mutual respect and greeting. Story 74. Multi-generational households and businesses in Taiwan and many Asian countries have a profound impact on children growing up with the traditions and cultural practices of their grandparents. This structure provides parents with greater financial flexibility and improved time management. It is more beneficial than each generation starting from scratch at 18. Story 75. The Japanese philosophy emphasizes striving for excellence in every task, regardless of its nature. If you are a sanitation worker, aim to be the best at your job. Perform your duties with cleanliness, politeness, efficiency, and accuracy. Story 76. A bow instead of a handshake. I have no desire to touch you, and I don't know if you just coughed or scratched yourself. I am from the United States, but I studied in Chile, and their constant cheek-kissing greeting was a bit much as well. Story 77. Bowing instead of hugging or shaking hands is still acceptable and a nice gesture if comfortable and appropriate. Not having to make physical contact is much nicer, especially in work settings. Story 78. I'm American for about 300 years because I have around 150 ancestors. My child graduated from high school in the United States and moved to the Middle East. Now, the same child who regularly left his underwear on the floor for days declares he cannot live without bidets. I understand. When he comes home with his wife, he says he is going to convert everything, and I just shrug it off. I also wear masks everywhere and wish more people would do the same. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.